And there we are. We're now recording. All right. So welcome everyone to our. Oh, I just got a message down in our chat here. Mary Taggart, welcome. Thank you everyone for certain names are popping up in the participants list. So thank you so much for saying hello. It's lovely to have you here. It is a rainy, gross day, which is why I feel like I'm all gloomy and dark in here. It's like a fireside chat without the fire. But my name is Adriane Blous. I am the Director of Leadership with the Episcopal Church Foundation. I am joined today by my colleague, Haley Bankey, who I will let introduce herself in a second, and our panelist. So today our webinar is called Leadership in a New Normal, Supporting Deacons Amidst a Pandemic. So we have, surprise, surprise, a deacon with us who will be sharing his experiences, his sources of support, and also in discussion kind of ways of other deacons who might be able to seek out support from their parishes, communities, etc. So we're going to kind of expand this discussion and really kind of get at different ways, tactics, strategies for supporting a very, very important group within our Episcopal family. So Haley, let me pass it on to you to introduce yourself, and then I will let Reverend Frederico Garza introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Adriane. My name is Haley Bankey. It is a bright sunny day in here in Texas, very different from New Jersey and New York where Adriane is. I am a program director at ECF for Leadership Resources, and I also serve as the executive director for Gathering of Leaders. My organization typically works with the priestly order, and so it's great to be in a conversation with deacons as such a vital part of our faith tradition. So I'm excited to be here.
My name is Frederico Garza. I'm a vocational deacon with the Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Virginia. I am yoked to St. Philip's Episcopal Church just right in my neighborhood. And it's just about a 10-minute walk from where I live, which is both a good and a bad thing. But I've been a deacon since 2012, and I work full-time as well. And I have Mary as my wife, and I have 2 grandkids and 3 kids. So that's about it.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And so before we dig in, let me just do a quick kind of tech reminder for everyone. So you have 2 kind of monitor S's, I'm going to make up that word, of tech today. So for all of us joining in Zoom who are participants, please feel free to enter any questions into the chat box. We will be monitoring that, or comments that we can share. That is at the bottom of your screen, a little bit to the left, and then at the bottom and a little bit to the right is the Q&A box, and you're welcome to actually enter questions in there as well. We'll be monitoring both. In addition, I'd like to welcome everyone who is live on Facebook. I love technology. Zoom, Facebook, we're everywhere. Please feel free to post your questions and comments on Facebook. I have another screen here with me, so I will be monitoring that, and we'll be able to share your questions and comments as we move through this. Also, to anyone who is here who may have friends, colleagues who might not be able to make it today, we are recording. And that recording will be available as of hopefully tomorrow up on our website. So that is ecfvp.org. And all participants, you will receive a recording of this that you can forward on to as many people as you'd like and share as wide as possible. It will also be stored on Facebook to watch later. So many different ways that we can share this information, share this support, just in case you have other people who aren't able to make it, or in case you want to go back and just kind of take a look at it again to gather some more information or more ideas. So With that said, I wanted to turn it over to Frederico. We have a few kind of framing questions to our discussion today. And one of them that I wanted to pose to him and that I prepped him with was just to talk about how are things going as a deacon during this pandemic? What have you been experiencing? And just to kind of elaborate on how you've been doing.
Well, it's obviously, as for everybody else, it's a lot different. And it's, as opposed to being a deacon before the pandemic, a lot different for everybody. And before, the church was an important part for me because it was a place that I could go to where a set of folks could hold me accountable. I could hold them accountable. We could share our faith. We could share our doubts and our fears and our frustrations. We could learn together, do Bible study together, share stories, engage each other in a way that a family ought to in order to bring the family members up. And the nice thing about being a deacon is I don't always, I'm not in a pastoral position per se, so I can be a lot more real to the folks, to the parishioners, to the congregants. And I miss that. I miss not being there on Sundays, and I miss not being there. Even, I never thought I'd say this, but I miss not being there during the midweek meetings, vestry, those type of meetings. But I think I'm able to still get nourishment from the church. We do have online Bible studies. We have a Sunday morning worship, on Facebook. And so I'm able to connect with the parishioners that way. And then we do talk offline, and we're still trying to pursue ministries offline. And that's been very helpful to me in terms of nourishing, because whenever I do any type of ministry, it's never me to someone else. It's always a back and forth. And it's that way whether I'm in the prison or whether I'm at church on a Sunday morning or whether I'm out in the neighborhood just talking with folks.
Thank you. And what are some of the ways that you have received support yourself as a deacon? Have you received anything from the community or in the parish? What are some of the ways that you found to be supportive during this time?
Well, I think our rector has been very supportive. We have a new rector. Our old rector left to become a bishop over in Memphis. So we have a new rector that came in just as this pandemic was hitting. And so I talk with her on a regular basis. And so as colleagues, we help feed each other. Unfortunately, the relationship has not been as close as I would like, I think, because we're not together as much as I was with my previous rector. But I think between my rector and a lot of the parishioners, they're there to lend support. They call me. If I don't call them, if they don't hear from me, they're giving me a phone call and just asking how I'm doing. That part has been very nice. I hope I answered your question.
So you bring up an interesting point. A lot of the people I work with, and I hear a lot of stories of people who have moved calls right at the beginning of the pandemic or in the middle of quarantine and establishing those relationships. You talked about your rector being new to the call and relatively new and establishing those relationships there. What are some techniques and ways of connecting during this really disconnected time that are working for you, and where are those ways that relationship building seems to be breaking down?
I think calling people up on the phone has been a great help for me, and I think for the parishioners as well, and for other people I minister to. I use the phone a lot more than I used to. I'm not exactly a phone kind of person, but in lieu of being able to meet in coffee shops or on Sunday mornings or during the week, midweek worship or study, the phone has been very useful. And then we do, every once in a while we will get together in person, but that's few and far in between for reasons understandable.
Now, are you able to find support from other deacons? Have you been able to reach out and find support there?
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you for saying that. Yes. So
Yeah.
we do have a group of deacons that meet regularly on Zoom. And then we'll sneak away and meet at an outdoor coffee shop once every other week. So the folks here in Richmond, there's about 3 or 4 of us that get together and just talk and chew the fat and ask what we're doing in terms of ministry and help each other discern where our next set of callings are going to be, if that makes sense. This time has been a time of, at least I found with my counterparts, has been a time of reflection, a time of discernment, a time to try to figure out where we're going to go next.
Mm.
And we help each other out. We pray together, we study together, and then we just give advice to each other. And then I'm in the Kairos prison ministry, and so there are a lot of spiritual giants on that team that that I can talk to, and we meet on a regular basis. So there are a lot of avenues that I'm utilizing to get spiritual help, to get encouragement, to get sustenance, for lack of a better term. I hadn't really thought about it, but there are quite a few ways that I'm doing that.
I just want to give a shout out to a number of the people here. We have a number of a deacons group, deacons of the Diocese of Vermont. We also have a deacon, Susan Fritz, who's in the Diocese of Washington. A deacon group in Southern Maryland. So I'm just reading some of these chat comments that are coming up. So welcome everyone as you're kind of coming in and posting as we share a lot of these. It's so wonderful to be able to kind of come together and support. Frederico, do you have any tips for those people who might not have these kinds of support? So whether maybe different creative ways that you found or you might be able to offer to people to reach out to get that support they need?
Basically what I did is I just shot out emails to everybody I knew, people that I was, co-ministers in my ministries. I tend to be one of the younger people in most of the groups that I'm in. So we've got folks that are 70 and 80 years old, and they have a wealth of knowledge, and they have quite a fleshed out networking group. And so I reached out to one Roman Catholic deacon, one of my mentors, and he invited me to 5 different prayer and share groups that he belonged to.
Nice.
And so I'm able to connect with those groups as well. And we've got some clergy here in Richmond on Wednesdays, and we do Bible study. But my recommendation would be to just reach out to people you know that you're ministering with, and they'll know folks. And I'm sure that they're already plugged in. If Jim Bain, who's 80 years old, can utilize his computer to reach out to and facilitate these Zoom meetings, I'm sure that there are a lot of other folks that can do the same thing and are doing the same thing.
And I just have one of the questions, and it's one of those ones that I've been asking a number of our panelists, especially during these pandemic times, and that is about boundaries and technology. Now, you've talked a lot about kind of phone and using the phone a lot more. Do you find that there's a lot more negotiation that has to happen in terms of maintaining boundaries or changing them to be able to meet people's needs, but also to meet your own needs in terms of self-care?
I'm going to have to confess that that boundary has been obliterated for me. I'm a programmer by trade, and so I'm on the computer all the time. We do online programming, and so I'm always online. And I wish I had something good to say about that, but I just have to confess I've failed at that part.
Haley, do you have any questions?
I'm going to bring up a comment, actually. Susan Reeve from the deacon group in Southern Maryland, when you brought up the Kairos prison ministry, she made a comment that in their area, the Kairos prison ministry has come to a screeching halt. Can you share some words? Her exact words were heartrending. Can you share some words? This is such a time of loss. a lot of our ministries that we're passionate about are either shifting or pausing, I hope is the right word, not stopping. But have you experienced any of that, and how are some ways that you've worked through some of that loss as a deacon?
There are some folks on our team that use JPay, which is an email system that they're just now allowing the residents here in Virginia to utilize. I have not figured that out yet, but we do just old-fashioned letters that we write back and forth to each other. I am meeting with people that are getting out for COVID reasons. We go to Buckingham Correctional, which in the state of Virginia happens to be the highest correctional center with the most incidents of COVID-19, as well as deaths. And so they're letting people out early. And folks are calling me when they get out, and we've been meeting, and just going out to, Panera, outdoor patio restaurant. I live in Richmond, so there's been a lot of stuff going about the statues here, Civil War statues. So when people come out, one of the first things I ask is, have you seen the statues at all? And they said no. And so we go over there, and we'll go there and experience that. And I just take them around town. The last guy I visited with, he hadn't been in Richmond in 23 years since he was locked up. And it was fun to engage with him. There's another guy about an hour west of me that I haven't seen since the pandemic started. But there are people coming out, and I'm trying to engage with them as they come out. But as far as going inside, that's been a struggle, especially for the residents inside the correctional center that we're at. They're really struggling without us going there on a regular basis. They're kind of like jellyfish, is what's been described to me. They're kind of like jellyfish, and they're just kind of floating, and they don't have any direction or anything. That's the main concern at this point. So our Kairos leader, is trying to figure out how we can utilize Zoom to engage the people in there. But at this point in time, Buckingham doesn't have that technology available to the residents. But I've had to replace the jail and prison ministries, not replace them, but augment them with just ministries here in the neighborhood. I live in an inner city neighborhood that's undergoing gentrification, but there's still a lot of the old folks still there, and I'm able to engage there, just talk with folks and take them out to coffee and stuff.
I wonder, in some of your conversations, have you talked about kind of what church might look like, kind of this new normal, this different normal, once we kind of emerge here? One of the things that we're working with at ECF is how to talk, how to grieve, but also to prepare about kind of the future. Have you had any conversations, kind of how the future might look and change in your ministries?
Even at the parish level, or at the?
Yeah, at the parish level, or even in your personal kind of ministry. Yeah.
I haven't had those discussions with the rector. So we elected not to meet outside. A lot of our folks are older, so the fear was that the older folks would feel obligated to come to church, even though it may not be an optimal situation for them. So we just decided to stay shut down until the bishop lets us worship indoors. We're a very old-fashioned church. Change comes hard for folks. And so when Bishop C.B. Rolfe was still rector there, we were talking about starting up some type of Saturday worship or Friday evening worship that would not coincide exactly with the Episcopal liturgy, and try to invite the new people that are coming in. As I said, our neighborhood's gentrifying very quickly. Try to invite the folks that are coming in, as well as the old folks in the neighborhood, and see if we could figure out a type of worship that would appeal to people who would never otherwise step foot in the church. So that and I hope to have those conversations with Reverend Marlene Forrest when we all get back together again, if not before.
We touched briefly on spiritual practices and keeping strong. And in terms of your pastoral care through this and your experience through this, what kind of spiritual practices are you taking on or maintaining for either some sense of normalcy or to keep your strength through this time, either personally or with others?
I am doing Bible study online with other clergy here in Richmond. I'm doing morning meditation. And the Bible study I'm doing it very consistently. Morning meditation is not as consistent as I would like to say it is, maybe 4 or 5 days a week. There are some weeks where it's there all the time, but I do find that the meditation helps me connect to God in a way, or helps me to open the door to God so that God can connect to me in a way that gives me stability, gives me perspective, and realigns my compass, not only my moral compass, but just make sure I don't go crazy kind of compass. And so when I feel that voice of God, and I can feel that presence, even if I don't feel the voice, when I feel the presence, it's a stabling factor in my life that helps me to go through the rest of the day, knowing I've got deadlines and I've got stress, and I work in a world that does not, where I hear F-bombs a lot more than I hear Holy Spirit. And so I need that grounding every day in order to stay focused and stay on task, and hopefully stay a baptized child of God that does things that makes God smile. Hopefully.
Thank you.
All right, we have a question from Stannard Baker. So Frederico, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read it. So pardon me, everyone, as I read this question, but thank you so much, Stannard, for posting this. Can you talk more about the priest-deacon relationship? Do you feel it is one of two ordained clergy? I assume this is during kind of the pandemic times. So two ordained clergy in their own distinct roles, or is there a maintenance, of a hierarchical relationship, or has something emerged that's entirely different during this time?
I think speaking with different deacons, it's always a different relationship. I was spoiled for the first 8 years of my being ordained. I had a rector who saw me as a colleague, and we basically had two different titles, but she asked me for advice. When she was considering putting her name in for a bishop position, she asked me what I thought about it, and so also she always involved me in liturgical decisions and gave me a lot of soft power in the church by backing me up quickly when I came in, and making sure that people knew that I was a deacon there, not to only wait on tables, but to do a lot of other things as well. And so I've been spoiled, but there are some deacons I find that are not fortunate enough to have that type of relationship. And it's much more of a hierarchical kind of thing where the priest is pointing downward at the deacon and saying, this is what's going to happen. I'm not sure with my new rector what's going to happen. We'll see what happens. But just meeting with her the few times that I have, I really like her a lot. I got a feeling she's going to take to the diaconate just like Mother Phoebe did, Bishop Phoebe.
As a follow-up, for anyone who finds themselves in a situation that isn't as collaborative or supportive, do you have any advice for how you might go from a hierarchical or help make that transition, or speak with your clergy person? Because it sounds like that would be a really great way to offer support for a deacon in that role.
What I've done in the past, not with the rector, but with a senior warden or two, is I've just had to pull them into a room behind a closed door and just have a heart-to-heart with them and let them know where I'm coming from, why I'm coming from this perspective. why I don't believe the relationship is as healthy as it ought to be, and then try to do a recalibration. And those have always worked well. They're always scary though, very scary. But I've never had one not work well. I think folks in the church, for the most part, not everybody's all holy and praising God all the time. There's a lot of business going on, and there's a lot of sometimes there's this going on. But I think that people in the church are genuinely interested in doing what's best for the church. And so I think when two people have conflict and both people are genuinely interested in what's best for the parishioners of the church, it's not hard to work something out. Of course, you may just wind up with someone that just, they know everything, and that I don't have any advice for. I don't know. I'm sure that in 10, 15, 20 years, I'll have that experience, but I haven't had it up to now.
All right. I'm just seeing we're coming up to our half an hour, and I believe we've answered questions and comments. So I was just wondering, Frederico, if you could give us any final thoughts, any words of wisdom, and then I'll offer a conclusion for our participants today.
Are most of our participants, are they deacons, or are they folks who want to be deacons? Or
it looks like we have a lot of deacons here, a number of different groups coming in from all over. Absolutely.
It'd be kind of like the rookie trying to give the folks that have been there for a long time any kind of advice or words of wisdom. It's not really my place to say anything in terms of that. All I can say is that the diaconate in Virginia is fairly new. I was one of the first ones to be recruited into the diaconate. And when they recruited us, they took a lot of us from the sacristy, folks that were very comfortable being at the altar, serving as acolyte, reading, all those things. And a second part of us, they pulled out of the homeless parks and prisons and soup kitchens. And I'm from the latter. And as an Episcopalian, I never read, I never did anything liturgical. I just sat in the pew. And I did not think that I would really like church life as a deacon. I thought the car would be really, really tight. And sometimes it is tight, but it's been surprising how much I have fallen in love with the people in the church that I serve. Mm-hmm. And how, when I first got there, I couldn't get anybody to go to prison with me. I couldn't get anybody to go to the homeless parks with me. It was just, no, that's not going to happen. And over time, the people's hearts have changed. I think the Holy Spirit has had a very definite impact on the church. And I think that they're starting to read the Gospels from Jesus's eyes, or from the eyes of the disciples, and they're starting to recognize that everything that Jesus did, it was for everybody else. And it's been very humbling and eye-opening to see that transformation happen. It didn't happen on my time scale. I wanted to happen like that. Then over time, it's just a gradual transition. I think that when I first got there, I think I was overly hard. So I was from the neighborhood. A lot of the people were from the neighborhood, but they moved out. When white flight escaped, when white flight happened in Richmond, our neighborhood was an all-black neighborhood. It turned into an all-black neighborhood. And then, and our parishioners were there as well. But these parishioners, they're physicians, they're attorneys, they're congressmen, and so they could have, when segregation had stopped, when desegregation was there, had taken place, they were able to move out into the suburbs. So they left with the white flighters, and they drive back into the neighborhood. And so for them, it's been difficult to engage with people from the neighborhood, but that has changed 180 degrees. The people in our church, they're out there in the neighborhoods, they're out there in the prisons, they're out there in the soup kitchens, and they have just taught me a lot of what it is to be a deacon. They have formed me in a way that I had not anticipated. I'm really not needed there. We've got a lot of deacons. They just they don't wear the collar. But some of them are better deacons than I am. And so there are a lot of ministries where they lead, and I'm just asking, what can I do to help? And that's the best thing. I don't want to lead any of these ministries because I don't want any of them to fall apart if I were to leave. I want the Holy Spirit to work with the people in the pew, and I'm just there to help and facilitate. They're the ones driving everything. And that seems to be what this whole thing has really shaped into St. Philip's. And I hate to go anywhere else because it's taken, I don't know. Hopefully I stay there for the rest of my ministry, but we'll see. But I would say that trying to tell the people that the church is not inside the stained glass, but outside. And this is nothing you deacons don't know already. And just preaching this message over and over and over again in different ways. And the Gospels give us different ways to do this, but it's just, sometimes for me, it's difficult not to get discouraged. It's that being a deacon in a parish can be a very lonely experience. You know, in my diocese, we're not paid, which I think is a good thing because it gives me autonomy to preach sermons that most priests wish they could preach. And so, but it's a lonely experience being just on the inside of the outside boundary, to be that prophetic voice and making sure that you don't allow yourself to gravitate towards the center. And so that you can speak truth to power all the time without worrying about whether my status in the church is going to be jeopardized. If I'm near the outside, I don't have much of a status to sacrifice. So I think it's important to speak truth to power, be that prophetic voice. And at least at St. Philip's, it's the service that I provide within the church and outside the church that gives my voice weight. And so although I don't have any real power in the church, when I step up to the pulpit, I think people know they're going to hear stories of what it's like to be homeless, because I've been there, what it's like to be locked up, because I've been there, what it's like to go back to these places and minister to people who are lost, who are alone, who are in their pits of despair, and working alongside other ministers. It's just a heart-rendering, mind-blowing experience, and I'm sure you know this, and I get to see the Holy Spirit every time. And I think that's what the most difficult thing for me during this whole pandemic is, the loss of being able to see God, being able to see Christ in the world through the eyes of the people that I serve. And I think that's why I've been holding on to these morning prayer time with God with both hands for dear life, because I'm so used to seeing God out in the world, on the streets, in the homeless parks and soup kitchens, and that's always been a guiding light for me. And now that I don't have that guiding light, I'm trying to find other ways to do that, which is probably in the long run going to make me a much healthier, well-balanced Christian. So in 10 years, I'm going to look back at this time and I'm going to be grateful, because God has forced me into other avenues to encounter the infinite. And that in itself has been a rewarding experience. So although I would not choose this path, I'm glad I didn't miss out on it, because I think I've grown deeper as a Christian. I've grown more grounded in my baptismal covenant. And I have learned that church is not just on a Sunday morning. And if that's what church is to folks, then we as a church need to help people deepen their discipleship.
Amen. Thank you. I'd like to let that just kind of sit and settle with us for a moment. Kind of as I conclude, I just want to thank Frederico for his words, his wisdom. Despite being new, that is some wisdom. And I'm already seeing comments in the chat box of thanks for this. I do want to just kind of keep people informed. So this is kind of a two webinar kind of series on supporting deacons during the pandemic. If you've been a part of the ECF webinars, you know that we've done a number of different webinars supporting priests, supporting lay leaders, but this was part of a kind of two webinar series on specifically supporting deacons during this time. And as we move forward, and just if you haven't seen the first part or first one in the series, we had Dr. Sandra Montes, who did a cafecito webinar in Spanish supporting Latinx deacons, which is also available on the ecfvp.org website, as well as Facebook, which is Episcopal Church Foundation, Facebook page. I just want to also invite people to sign up for our newsletter as we move forward into this new normal, better normal, post-pandemic church. I would like to, and Haley and I are kind of a tag team at this, really continue these conversations of supporting deacons as we move forward. So this is part of our kind of two webinar series, but we're really looking forward to enhancing that conversation. So as the Episcopal Church Foundation moves forward in its many ministries, we look to better support deacons in this. So as participants in this webinar, you will be receiving a recording. We hope you share that with as many people as possible. If you join our Facebook group, to share that as well through your Facebook channels. So thank you again, Frederico, for your words of wisdom. I thank everyone for joining us. I pray for everyone's health, both physical and emotional health during this time, for the health of their communities and parishes and families. And I really look forward, as we move forward, to kind of continuing these conversations with deacons and to better support those members of our Episcopal family in the diaconate. Look forward to that. Join our newsletter and to receive that so that we can keep you posted on upcoming webinars and articles as well. So I thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Haley, for being my co-host, tech guru. And everyone, thank you again, Frederico. Be well, and we hope to be in conversation with you again. Take care, everyone, and have a lovely day.